Good morning and welcome to my presentation today. I'd like to discuss some personal highlights from the recent 10th Annual European CME Forum meeting. My name is Eugene Pozniak. I'm Programme Director of the European CME Forum. My day job is as Managing Director of CME Learning. We're an ACCME accredited education provider based in Manchester in the UK. And I've done nothing else other than CME since 2000. As a European CME Forum, this is an organisation that's a not-for-profit. What we do is we get together people with an interest in CME to discuss CME matters. We're now in the 11th year. We also run the Journal of European CME, which is a diamond open access journal, free for anyone to go and read this, and also the Good CME Practice Group. So today I'd like to go through the meeting itself, first discussing a little bit the approach that we took, the structure that we adopted for the meeting, the evaluations that we received and the lessons that we learned, and also to focus just on each of our stakeholder groups as to what they took from the meeting. So the 10th annual meeting took place at the home of the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland in Dublin in November 2017. It's a fantastic meeting venue, actually probably the best meeting venue we've had for a European CME Forum meeting. We just had all the space where we could have the main lectures and also breakout workshops in this one building. When we were going through the meeting planning process, naturally we look at the evaluations that we've received over the years, the lessons that we learned from the 9th meeting previously, but we also run an annual needs assessment process, which starts usually just before summer in the run-up to the meeting, that we can communicate with the faculty, the results of that. We worked very closely this year with Professor Hilary Hoey, who's the Director of Professional Competence at the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland, who was an incredible help to get the Irish voice and to really make this collaboration work this year. We review the developments in the CME environment, and it's not just Europe. We do look at the whole world to see what's actually going on there. So primarily, yes, it's North America and Europe, but other places as well. We communicate with the faculty, the session chairs, the workshop leaders. There's a continuous discussion right up to the time of the meeting. So I mentioned this needs assessment that we run beforehand. So it's done using SurveyMonkey. And we usually get between sort of 90 and 120 responses from across Europe and the US. And here, just as a quick sort of overview, these questions are coming out sort of year after year. Over the past sort of 2 or 3 years, people are wanting to know what the evidence is showing that CME actually works, how it has an impact on clinical practice, and of course, industry relations. The fourth one there, how to carry out a needs assessment and identify relevant learning objectives, is also very important, especially for our European audience. Okay. But I say that that's only over the sort of past 2 or 3 years. We've seen an evolution over these past 10 years, and what we're seeing is a move away from CME as this thing that's a process of accreditation to collect credit points of some kind. Our audience and the community as a whole now is much more interested in how to actually do it. How do you develop relevant and meaningful education? How do you evaluate the outcomes of it? What is good quality? So the credit hunters really are now very much secondary or tertiary in our objectives. It's how do we actually develop effective education? Our educational format, the meeting itself is 48 hours, but we say it's over sort of 2.5, 3 days. And we try and mix things up. We do a balance of live presentations as in the plenary sessions, panel discussions, Q&A. There's lots of interactivity built into the sessions. But over the past 3 years now, we've included a series of workshops. This has proved very popular, and we have 4 parallel workshops breaking up the whole meeting as well. And as CME Learning is an ACCME accredited provider, we can also work in joint providership with the European CME Forum and offer CME credits for this CME meeting. So coming to the structure this year, we broke it down into 3 themes, and we called them inward, outward, and onward. And it's just quite simply, the first part of the meeting looks inward. Look in the mirror, what do we do in our own group? And of course, it's primarily about designing educational, so we're looking at different approaches to educational design from different groups. The outward bit is listening to others, maybe just seeing who do we collaborate with, who's our target audience, who are the other people we should be communicating with. So we're looking at sort of relations there. And onward is an opportunity to do a bit of horizon scanning, seeing what's new, what's innovative, what's out there, what's happening. This year we brought back the lunch with the learners, which is an incredibly popular session, but actually, although it looks quite effortless, it's quite difficult to put together. This is literally over lunch, the delegates go back into the room and we have a skilled moderator that has a conversation with 3 or 4, we had 4 healthcare professionals, doctors and nurses, fielding questions from the audience. So we're actually just seeing what does it mean when we're putting things into practice, what does our end user actually think about the CME? And as I mentioned before, we have the panel discussions and Q&A as well. So just a moment on the 3 outward themes, the 3 broken down themes, inward, outward and onward. Within each of these sessions, we found that when we're running the workshops, of course people split out into 4 workshops, but of course the delegates want to go to more than one. So we've brought in a reflection session. So after the workshops, everyone's in the main room again. The workshop leaders were then invited to give a summary of their session, of their actual workshops, and be open to more Q&A from people in the room. And the introduction session, we had an overall chair for each one of these themes who would guide some kind of introductory session ahead of the workshops, which was on that theme. So to the actual day itself, over the years we've run what we've called day 0 meetings, just because they take part the day before day 1. And it was really to answer the request by various stakeholder groups to meet up beforehand while they're there at the meeting, just to talk about their own specific topics of interest. So as usual, we had a half-day meeting with these 4 groups. Industry, there's a group called the International Pharmaceutical Alliance for CME. This group is represented by the grants offices of the major drug companies, and smaller drug companies, actually all drug companies, and device and diagnostics companies as well. So it is very much industry, it's not just pharmaceutical. The medical societies, so the delegates from the offices as well as the volunteers, the education committee people are invited to a meeting which is chaired by Robin Stevenson, who's the editor-in-chief of the Journal of European CME. The Accreditors get together, and this meeting now is hosted by the International Academy for CPD Accreditation. This is very much a global collaboration of a number of people with an interest in accreditation, and the providers. And this is a meeting that we run as European CME Forum, the Good CME Practice Group, which is a membership group that there are other presentations that goes through these details. So after this, the day 0 meetings finished, we had lunch, and we then started the actual 10th European CME Forum. This is just a graphic representing the meeting itself. So on the far left column, you can see on Wednesday, there's lunch. And what I'm just trying to do here is illustrate, using different shades of green, the 3 sessions. So inward is that bright green, outward is that sort of paler green, onward is the dark green. And the blue sessions are the panel discussions, the plenary sessions, where we're discussing other things. Each year we use interactivity. Right from the very first European CME Forum, we have a technology partner and who actually use the meeting to sort of showcase their own technology as well. And they've developed an app, which we had for this year. And it could work on iPhone, Android, also on web. Of course, it does the obvious things like reducing the amount of print materials. And it helps with the interactivity for questions, Q&A at the panel discussions. But the evaluations is a major part of CME, and it actually does help us when we're developing our own programs, because it's quite tough to identify what does our target audience actually want to hear about, how is CME moving. So to have some kind of dialogue that's nice, easy, quick, effective is something that we're really looking for, and this app actually offered this to us very nicely. And of course, it can give all the support information that we need, background papers, things that you wouldn't normally print. So it adds to the overall meeting experience. And this year we also had this engagement tool. And what was really interesting with this technology this time is that we could actually employ some gamification into the meeting. So, a challenge in meetings, as well as getting the evaluations, actually we can go through each of these points. We rewarded people for engaging with the app. So with each evaluation they would give of a session, and it's not just, well, it certainly isn't anything like, how did you rate this speaker? That's not useful to us. What's useful to us is knowing how relevant is the information to the actual person's practice, and whether they're going to do anything differently. So we use quite conversive sort of evaluation techniques to get really high quality feedback. But we give them points for engaging in the evaluations. If they take photos of the meeting, they can use the app to upload it. So this year you'll see on the website we have some lovely photos that were taken mostly by the delegates. Twitter, getting the noise out into the Twitter sphere is also rewarded. Of course, you have the Twitterati that might send out 40, 50 messages a day. We're not interested in that so much, but if people get a point or a reward every time they tweet, up to a maximum tweet, they get something. And we're at the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland. As well as being a historic building, actually has a museum collection there as well. So we worked with the archivist of the museum, who put together a wonderful display of artifacts, memorabilia, etc., of items that they have related to medical education. And of course, they've got the permanent exhibits there, painting statues and things. And we devised a quiz and a treasure hunt so that people could actually get to know the RCPI better, go around the exhibits, they could take the tour, etc., and reward them. So it's not quite having too much fun, but we're just engaging with our venue much deeper in a great way. They had some fantastic things to show. Another challenge of a meeting is getting people to interact with each other and with authors of posters. So we had a good selection of posters this year, and if delegates actually engaged with the poster authors, they were also rewarded, and the exhibitors as well. Of course, we're grateful for the exhibitors to be there and to help incentivize people to actually talk to them a bit as well. They got a few points. And there's a maximum of 300 points to get, and we had a leaderboard. There were prizes given halfway through and at the end, and it seemed to work. And the main thing with European CME Forums, we'll give things a go. If it works, we'll do it again. If it needs work on, we'll try and improve it. And if it doesn't work, we do ditch it. And over the years, you will have noticed that there are certain formats that we've stuck with and improved, and others that we've replaced. Okay, so the meeting itself. I mean, overall, most of the people were happy most of the time, and that's with the content, with the format, the setting, the length of the meeting. And what was lovely to, well, not necessarily lovely to see, but each of the three themes were welcomed very positively by the delegates. And it's the inward session, the one at the beginning, looking at educational design, which was consistently the most popular across all the delegates. So we seem to have got the balance right there, and also with our engagement with the audience, we're saying from what you've learned, and if you're doing educational design, and there'll be other presentations about, for example, Don Moore's levels of outcomes, the outcomes framework, and he was chairing that first session. And there was discussion through the meeting saying, okay, you've learned how to do certain things. You have the skills to take them back to the office to do it, but will you actually change what you do? And it's this change in performance, which is, in a way, the holy grail of CME in this kind of environment, a level 5 outcome. And because we were asking for it and showing people how to change things in their own practice, we started getting feedback after the meeting of actual level 5 outcomes data, which was very heartening. There was great feedback about how we engage with the interprofessional team and the voice of the patients. So these are new topics that are coming into CME. How do you engage? If you're looking at the healthcare team, it's not just the doctors. It's not the boss and the doctors. Nurses are involved, pharmacists are involved. There are other members of the interprofessional team who are critical to the patient care. And we're seeing this now being incorporated much more in CME. It's formalized more in the US, the actual framework for this to happen, but in Europe, it's a kind of discussion that we're just scratching the surface on. The Royal College of Physicians of Ireland actually were very good to come up with some examples of this as well, and to actually see it in practice in Europe was very useful. And the onwards session also came up with these sort of novel concepts. We are, of course, with our own journal, we spent a bit more time as well trying to introduce people to publishing their own work. It's something in Europe especially we're not very good at, writing up our experiences and getting them published in a peer-reviewed journal of some kind. The lunch with the learners was popular as always. And on the Friday, as you would have seen, we had 2 panel discussions. One was led from the front by Professor Hoey. The second one was a direct Q&A with the audience, helped to actually elicit questions and go deeper into topics and look to the future. And there is also a session called the Unsession, the CME Unsession, led by Lawrence Sherman, who's been doing this every year now, where literally he has no brief in the room other than to elicit, are there any other questions left in the room, so people do not leave the meeting without any questions still ringing in their heads. So, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, the feedback bears this out. People want guidance on how to do the CME, how to develop education, how to measure it. And also we're starting to see, not quite newcomers to CME, but people who maybe don't have the breadth of experience that the older hands have, and they've asked for an introduction to session, even if it's covering the glossary of CME, because it feels now that the meeting has quite a few different things to cover, but just to hit the ground running is quite tough. So just to have a check-in session beforehand, which we're working on now, to cover some of the introductory information and especially cover off the jargon before the meeting starts is an important thing to do. But all together, we talk about how to do the CME, etc. The feedback keeps coming back saying, can we please have more clarity? What are the rules? What's the purpose of things? Where's the documentation? Why are we doing CME? What do the regulators say? What do the accreditors say? Why can industry do this but not that? This is something that's been ongoing for years, and why European CME Forum started in the first place 10, 11 years ago. These questions are still coming up. We're getting the clarity now. But in the European CME Forum, where we have all these different groups together, we're actually testing it and putting it into practice. So we need to keep focused on that as well. So just looking at our stakeholder groups, just briefly for each one, I've got one slide per group. So when it comes to the CME accreditation body, so we're talking about the European accreditors. There's a new group called CMEA, and this is made up of the accreditation bodies from cardiology, respiratory and hematology, who've come together as a starting point to look at harmonization of standards. They've identified there is no official government mandate to drive CME in Europe, anywhere, in any country, on a pan-European level. And the only way that CME can be improved is through dialogue and consensus. So they've started this process. I understand there's already a 4th or even a 5th body that's joined this now, and it's really, as we've known over the years, it's through working together that we're going to end up with a harmonized European system of some kind. And also in the onward session, we had a very interesting discussion there with the American Nurses Credentialing Center, where they presented a new concept of CME that was just competency-based and not time-based. For years we've heard, that 1 hour, 1 credit model doesn't work. You could sit for an hour in a lecture theatre and learn nothing. You can work in a workshop for 1 hour and it can revolutionize your clinical practice. So why should they each carry 1 credit each? Is there another way of measuring it? And the nurses in the US presented this lovely way of evaluating the learners through the education and offered a new way of looking at credit. So that was interesting. The medical societies and associations, especially in Europe, so the Europeans that turned up, they've identified some real challenges about the changes in how industry is funding both their medical societies, but especially education. There are changes afoot. And that's really prompting much more thinking and examination of the role of the medical societies when it comes to their membership. What are they there to do? And actually, we're seeing now more focus on CME education. They're not just there presenting their annual conferences with exhibitions from industry. They're actually thinking about educational needs, looking at performance of their doctors, their members, and also even patient outcomes. So we're seeing changes there. Industry, and this is very interesting at the moment. 2017, 2018, at the meeting we had members of the IPACME group that I mentioned earlier and FPIA, and talking about the discussion that's ongoing still about how industry funds medical education in Europe. There are going to be a change in the code of practice, which we're expecting shortly. Actually, we can't be too time dependent here, but let's say sort of end of 2018, 2019, there should be some clarifications that are coming out. And as part of this conversation, the year before, in 2016, we had a presentation from this group, from the IPACME group and FPIA. In 2017, this paper, the reference that you see at the bottom, was published ahead of this meeting, and most of the authors were present at the 10th European CME Forum to discuss this. There are 2 main topics here: quality of medical education, as well as how industry supports medical education. And there's going to be another presentation specifically on this topic, again in this archive. But this was a hot topic for us in Dublin last November. Education providers. Now this is sort of interesting. This has been going for a while. We've had education providers setting up the Good CME Practice Group as a distinct non-MedComms group of companies that do not work under the control of industry. And there was a lot of discussion here. Instead of looking at this group as education providers, seeing them as CME educators. So they're actually active in the education process rather than just providing it. And at the end of each meeting, we're asking this question: do you feel that by attending European CME Forum, you're a member of a CME community of practice? It's all well and good going to a meeting and just sucking up information that's being presented in front of you, but we really try and make an effort to bring people together, to communicate with each other, and to have this community going. And this year, it's jumped up by a few percentage points of the absolutely yes. 39% of the people who are there actually feel part of a community, and no one actually is just thinking, I'm an observer to something else going on. So we can see that year on year there is this sort of community. But with the community comes the vocabulary, it comes the actual practice of doing CME in Europe, and we're seeing this actually evolving. There is a full meeting report available, written by Ron Murray, and it's published in the Journal of European CME, and the link you can find at the bottom here. And other reports and commentaries are available either on our website or also at the Journal of European CME website. You just follow the icons. There are 10 meetings there that you can go in, all the presentations that we've given, publications, Twitter streams, photographs, they're all available from this website. It's the largest resource on CME anywhere outside of the US. So I do encourage you to find some information there. And that's everything that I have for you today. Thank you very much for your attention.